My sister Jenna convinced my ailing grandmother I was too financially irresponsible for an inheritance, so I was written out of the will. I just hugged my grandma and told her I understood. What neither of them knew was that her lawyer, the one who drafted the new documents, is my husband, Ben. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The air in my grandmother Margaret's bedroom was thick with the scent of lavender potpourri and antiseptic wipes, a combination that always signaled a turn for the worse. Sunlight struggled through the heavy floral curtains, casting long shadows across the room and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stillness. Margaret, my once vibrant grandmother, looked impossibly small against the mountain of pillows propping her up. Her skin was as thin and delicate as parchment, her bright blue eyes clouded with a weariness that had nothing to do with her 87 years, and everything to do with the recent stroke that had stolen her mobility. I sat on the edge of her bed, holding her cool, frail hand in mine. It was a hand that had baked thousands of cookies, wiped away my childhood tears, and gripped a garden trowel with unshakable strength for decades. Now, it trembled with the slightest effort. "Nicole, dear," she began, her voice a reedy whisper, "we need to talk about arrangements." My stomach tightened. I knew this conversation was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. As an architect, I dealt in plans and solid foundations, but the architecture of a family falling apart was something I could never quite design a solution for. "Of course, Grandma, whatever you want to talk about." She took a shaky breath, her gaze darting towards the door as if expecting my sister, Jenna, to burst in at any moment. Jenna had been a constant, cloying presence since Grandma's health scare, fluttering around the house with a performative concern that set my teeth on edge. "It's about the will," Margaret said, finally meeting my eyes. The shame in them was a physical blow. I've made a change. Your sister, she pointed out some things. Sensible things." I kept my expression neutral, a mask of calm I had perfected over years of dealing with Jenna's manufactured dramas. "What kind of things, Grandma?" "She's worried about you, Nicole, about your finances." Margaret squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly firm for a moment. "She says you're irresponsible, that you don't manage your money well. She showed me pictures from her blog, all those trips you take. She said an inheritance would be wasted, that you'd just squander it." The accusation hung in the still air, so absurd it was almost laughable. The trips she mentioned were architectural conferences I attended for work, my expenses covered by my firm. I was a partner at one of the city's most respected architectural firms, with a portfolio of successful projects and a financial plan as solid as the buildings I designed. My husband, Ben, and I lived comfortably but well within our means. Jenna, on the other hand, was a lifestyle influencer who lived a champagne life on a lemonade budget, constantly propped up by credit cards and small, wheedling loans from family members. The lie was so audacious, so perfectly crafted to prey on our grandmother's anxieties. To Margaret, who had lived through the Great Depression, financial irresponsibility was a cardinal sin. "Jenna is going to be the sole beneficiary," Margaret whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "She promised she would manage everything and take care of you if you ever needed it." The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it stole my breath. Jenna hadn't just disinherited me, she had painted herself as my future savior, the responsible custodian of my own legacy. She had poisoned our grandmother's perception of me with such venomous precision that Margaret now saw me as a charity case. A hot, angry wave washed over me, but I forced it down, burying it deep. Getting angry now would only validate Jenna's claims. It would make me look unstable, emotional, and, ironically, irresponsible. I looked at my grandmother's worried, tear-streaked face, and the anger was replaced by a profound sadness. She was the true victim here, a pawn in Jenna's greedy game. So I did the one thing Jenna would never have expected. I leaned forward, wrapped my arms around my grandmother's fragile shoulders, and hugged her gently. "It's okay, Grandma," I said, my voice soft and steady. "I understand, you need to do what you think is right. Please don't worry about me, I'll be fine." She sobbed into my shoulder, a sound of relief and guilt all mixed together. "You're such a good girl, Nicole, always so understanding." I held her until her breathing evened out, my mind a cold, quiet place where a new kind of blueprint was beginning to form. As I pulled away and smiled at her, a single, clear thought solidified in my mind. Jenna thought she had won. She had played her hand, convinced she held all the cards. She had slandered my name, stolen my inheritance, and manipulated a vulnerable old woman. But the betrayal was worse than the money she stood to gain, and for that, there would be a reckoning. I drove home on autopilot, the familiar streets of the suburbs blurring into a watercolor of green lawns and tidy houses. Each stop sign, each turn, was a small anchor to reality in a sea of swirling emotions. Betrayal has a specific taste. It's metallic and bitter, like an old penny held under the tongue. The pain wasn't about the money. Ben and I were secure. It was the casual, calculated cruelty of the act. It was the way Jenna had taken the two things I was proudest of, my professional success and my stable life, and twisted them into weapons to use against me. When I walked through the door, Ben was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. The rhythmic thud of the knife on the cutting board was a comforting, normal sound in a world that had just tilted on its axis. He looked up and smiled, but his smile faded the moment he saw my face. "Nikki, what's wrong?" he asked, putting the knife down and wiping his hands on a towel. I didn't have to say a word. I just walked into his arms and let out the breath I felt like I'd been holding since I left Margaret's house. He held me, his embrace solid and unwavering, a human foundation I could always count on. "She did it," I finally mumbled into his shoulder. "Jenna actually did it. She convinced Grandma to write me out of the will." Ben was silent for a long moment, processing. He wasn't just my husband, he was an estate lawyer, a man who saw the absolute worst of family dynamics play out in his office every single day. He knew the playbook. "On what grounds?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "That I'm financially irresponsible," I said, pulling back to look at him. I tried for a wry smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "She used my work trips as proof that I squander money. She told Grandma that she would need to manage the estate to protect it from me." Ben's expression hardened. He ran a hand through his hair, a flicker of professional anger crossing his features before it settled into quiet resolve. "And Margaret believed her. She's scared Ben, and Jenna has been there every day, whispering in her ear. It was a masterclass in manipulation." I sank onto a stool at the kitchen island, feeling a deep, bone-aching weariness. I didn't fight it. I just told Grandma I understood. Getting upset would have just proven Jenna's point. "You did the right thing," he said, his voice firm. "The absolute right thing." He came and stood behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders. "Fighting her directly would have been a mistake. We don't have to fight her directly." That was when my phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a picture of Jenna, a heavily filtered selfie where she was posed on a yacht she'd clearly only been on for a 1-hour tour. My personal symbol of her fraudulent life. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the ignore button. "You should answer it," Ben said quietly. "Let's hear what she has to say." I took a deep breath and swiped to answer, putting the call on speaker. "Hello, Jenna." "Nikki, hi, I was just calling to see how you were," she chirped, her voice dripping with a saccharine sympathy that was more insulting than any overt gloating. "I heard you went to see Grandma today. She's so fragile right now, we all have to be so careful with her." "She is," I agreed, my voice carefully devoid of emotion. "Listen, about the arrangements," she began, adopting a hushed, conspiratorial tone. "I hope you're not upset. It's not about the money, you know. It's about protecting Grandma's legacy. I was just so worried that well, you know how you are with money. I couldn't bear to see everything she and Grandpa worked for get frittered away." There it was again. The lie, now served directly to me, coated in a layer of feigned concern. I could feel Ben's hands tighten slightly on my shoulders. "Grandma told me her decision," I said calmly, "and I support her completely." There was a split second of surprised silence on the other end. This wasn't the reaction she'd expected. She'd been banking on tears, on an angry outburst, on a fight that would let her play the martyr. "Oh," she said, recovering quickly. "Oh, that's so mature of you, Nicole. I knew you'd understand eventually. I'll make sure to put a little something aside for you, of course, once everything is settled." The condescension was suffocating. She was offering me scraps from my own table. "That's very generous of you, Jenna. I have to go. I'm in the middle of making dinner." "Okay, love you," she trilled, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone, a cold fury solidifying in my chest. She thought this was over. She thought she had won a simple, straightforward victory. But as I sat there in the warmth of my own kitchen, in the beautiful, stable life I had built for myself, I felt a switch flip inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was being rapidly eclipsed by a steely determination. Jenna had always underestimated me. She saw my quiet competence as weakness and my lack of drama as a lack of passion. She had forgotten who I was: a planner, a strategist, a person who understood that the strongest structures are built on unseen foundations. And she had forgotten one crucial detail, the one little secret our family had kept for years. The man standing behind me, my loving husband, was also Margaret's longtime lawyer. Jenna had just confidently walked into a trap of her own making, and she had no idea we were about to close the door. My grandmother Margaret was the anchor of our family. After Grandpa passed away, she was the sun around which we all orbited. Growing up, her house was my sanctuary. It was a place of comforting routines: shelling peas on the porch in the summer, the scent of cinnamon and cloves at Christmas, the quiet hum of her sewing machine as she mended one of my torn dresses. I was the quiet, studious grandchild. I'd spend hours in Grandpa's old study, poring over his collection of National Geographic magazines and books on engineering, fascinated by how things were put together. When I got older and started my career in architecture, Margaret was my biggest cheerleader. She'd cut out newspaper articles about my projects and tape them to her refrigerator. When I helped her navigate the complexities of her finances after Grandpa's death, consolidating accounts, setting up automatic payments, creating a clear budget, she called me her little treasurer. She trusted me implicitly. We had a bond built on years of quiet, steady reliability. I was the one who drove her to doctor's appointments, who fixed her leaky faucet, who sat with her for hours just talking when she felt lonely. Jenna's role in the family was different. She was the firecracker, the whirlwind of energy who would breeze in for holidays, charming everyone with dramatic stories about her life, and then vanish just as quickly, often leaving a small trail of chaos in her wake. She was 4 years younger than me, and from a young age, she seemed to possess an innate understanding of how to get what she wanted through sheer force of personality. While I was building things, Jenna was building a brand, herself. Her career as a lifestyle influencer was a mystery to most of the family, but a source of constant stress for me. It involved posting glamorous, heavily curated photos of herself in expensive outfits, at trendy restaurants, or on sponsored vacations that never seemed to quite cover their own costs. Her online life was a fantasy of effortless wealth and success, but behind the scenes, it was a different story. I knew because I had seen the credit card statements that were accidentally mailed to Grandma's house. I'd fielded the occasional, panicked late-night call. "Nikki, can you just spot me a few hundred? I have a big brand deal coming through. I'll pay you back next week." The payback rarely, if ever, materialized. Her resentment towards me had always simmered just beneath the surface. My stable career, my marriage to Ben, our comfortable home, it was all an affront to her. In her eyes, my life was boring, conventional, and worst of all, accomplished without any of the flair she valued so highly. She saw my prudence as a personal judgment on her impulsiveness. The interest she took in Grandma Margaret's assets began subtly. A few years ago, it started with pointed comments. "This house must be worth a fortune now, Grandma," she'd say, running a hand over the polished mahogany dining table. "You should really think about protecting your assets." Later, her inquiries became more direct. "What kind of stocks did Grandpa leave you? Are they managed well? You know, you can't be too careful these days." I tried to warn Margaret gently that Jenna's interest seemed unhealthy, but Grandma would wave it off. "Oh, she's just curious, dear. She has a mind for business, that one." Margaret saw Jenna's ambition and mistook it for acumen. She saw my quiet stability and, under Jenna's insidious influence, was beginning to mistake it for a lack of drive. The antagonist in my life wasn't just Jenna. It was the polished, disingenuous persona she had so carefully constructed. Her Instagram feed was a masterwork of deception. She presented herself as a savvy entrepreneur, a woman of the world who understood the finer things. In reality, she was teetering on a mountain of debt, her flashy lifestyle funded by a dangerous combination of credit and manipulation. The most disingenuous part was her feigned interest in Grandma's well-being. She'd post a picture of herself bringing Margaret a bouquet of flowers with a caption like, "Family first. So important to spend time with our elders. They are precious treasures." The post would get 1,000 likes from her followers, who had no idea that the visit lasted exactly as long as it took to snap the photo, or that the conversation inevitably circled back to the monetary value of the treasures in the house. Her plan to disinherit me was the culmination of years of jealousy and greed. By painting me as financially irresponsible, she wasn't just trying to secure the entire inheritance for herself, she was trying to rewrite our family history. She was trying to steal my identity as the responsible one, the reliable one, and claim it for herself. It was the ultimate act of projection. The conflict wasn't just about a will, it was about the truth. And I was beginning to realize that the only way to win was to dismantle her carefully constructed fantasy, piece by painful piece. The initial shock and hurt began to recede over the next few days, replaced by a cold, clear focus. The passive victim role was not one I was comfortable with. I was an architect. My entire profession revolved around identifying problems and designing elegant, functional solutions. Jenna's betrayal was a problem of faulty architecture, built on a foundation of lies. It was time to draw up a new set of plans. The turning point came on a quiet Saturday morning. Ben and I were sitting at our breakfast nook, the morning sun streaming in, coffee mugs warming our hands. The domestic peace felt like a world away from the ugly drama Jenna had created. "I can't just let her get away with this, Ben," I said, breaking the silence. "Not because of the money, because of what she's doing to Grandma. She's isolating her, preying on her fears. It's elder abuse, dressed up in a cardigan and a concerned smile." Ben nodded, his expression serious. "I agree, so what's our first move?" This was where my clever trap, or more accurately, our secret advantage, came into play. "Tell me everything about your professional relationship with my grandmother," I said. "The real story." Ben leaned back, his lawyer mind kicking into gear. "Okay, your grandmother, Margaret, hired my firm 8 years ago. It was 3 years before you and I even met. Her previous lawyer was retiring and recommended me for her estate planning. She came in, we drafted her original will and set up her trusts. It was all very standard. She named you and Jenna as equal beneficiaries." He paused, taking a sip of his coffee. "Then, a few years later, I met you at that charity gala. When things started getting serious between us, I went to Margaret and offered to transition her file to another partner at my firm. I told her that my marrying her granddaughter could be perceived as a conflict of interest down the line. It was her choice to make." "And what did she say?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "She laughed," Ben recalled with a smile. "She said, 'Ben, I hired you because you're the best, not because you might one day marry my granddaughter. I trust you. We'll just keep this between us. No need to give Jenna any more ammunition for her little dramas.' So we all agreed. You, me, and her. We never told Jenna that we were married. She knows I'm Grandma's lawyer, and she knows you're married to a man named Ben. She's just never connected the dots. She's too self-absorbed to have ever asked for my last name or where I work." It was the perfect, unintentional piece of leverage. Jenna was operating in the dark, thinking the lawyer was just some impartial functionary rubber-stamping her machinations. As her lawyer, Ben continued, his tone shifting, I have a fiduciary duty to protect her interests. My primary responsibility is to my client, Margaret, and if I have reason to believe she is being subjected to undue influence, I am ethically obligated to investigate. And Jenna calling me irresponsible and demanding to be the sole heir isn't undue influence, I asked. It's the textbook definition, Ben confirmed, especially given Margaret's vulnerable state. The new codicil Jenna pressured her into signing is on very shaky legal ground, but to challenge it effectively, we need more than just suspicion. We need proof. Hard proof that Jenna's motive is greed and that her claims about you are fabrications. That was my cue. The passive phase was over. It was time for investigation. I can get that, I said, a new energy surging through me. My mind, accustomed to analyzing structural integrity and finding hidden flaws, shifted to a new target, Jenna's life. Grandma gave me a folder of her financial documents years ago, for safekeeping, I explained. Bank statements, bills, the works, I still have it. I bet there's a paper trail of Jenna's loans in there. That afternoon, I retrieved the heavy accordion file from our home office. For hours, I sat at the dining table, laying out statements and receipts like pieces of a complex puzzle. My architect's eye for detail, trained to spot the slightest inconsistency in a blueprint, was now focused on the numbers. And the numbers told a story. There it was, a clear pattern of manipulation. Small checks written to Jenna labeled gift in Margaret's spidery handwriting that grew larger and more frequent over the past 2 years. Then I found something even better. A few of Jenna's credit card bills that had been mailed to Margaret's house. The balances were staggering. One card was maxed out at $20,000. The statement was filled with charges from high-end boutiques, lavish dinners, and a spa resort in Arizona. This wasn't the behavior of a savvy businesswoman. This was the behavior of someone in a financial death spiral. The most damning piece of evidence was a copy of a letter from a collection agency regarding a defaulted car loan. It was addressed to Jenna, care of Margaret's address. She was clearly using her grandmother's home as a safe drop for the bad news she didn't want showing up at her own apartment. I gathered the documents, my hands steady. This was more than enough to start. I was no longer just a hurt granddaughter. I was an investigator, building a case. And the first cracks in the foundation of Jenna's lies were beginning to show. Armed with the first pieces of concrete evidence, Ben and I knew the next step couldn't be a direct, aggressive confrontation. That would only allow Jenna to play the victim and paint us as bullies. The strategy had to be subtle, an exercise in psychological jujitsu. We needed to use Jenna's own arrogance and overconfidence against her. We decided to arrange a casual family visit, a check-in on Grandma Margaret with the 3 of us present. I called Jenna to set it up. Hey, I was thinking of stopping by to see Grandma on Sunday afternoon. I thought it would be nice if we both went to show her we're a united front. The phrase united front was a carefully chosen piece of bait. It appealed to her sense of being in control, the newly appointed matriarch-in-waiting. Oh, that's a wonderful idea, Nikki, she said, her voice oozing magnanimity. It's so important for her to see that there are no hard feelings. When Sunday arrived, I found Jenna already there, fluttering around Margaret's sitting room, plumping pillows and adjusting blankets with an air of theatrical ownership. The scene was set. We made small talk for a while, the conversation flowing over the treacherous undercurrents of what was unsaid. I kept my demeanor calm and sisterly. After about 20 minutes, I saw my opening. Grandma, I was just going through some of my old files the other day, and I found that folder of your financial papers you gave me a while back. I began, my tone casual. I think it's probably best if you have it here now, so you and Jenna can manage things together. Margaret looked relieved. Oh, thank you, dear, that's very thoughtful. Jenna, however, puffed up with self-importance. Yes, that's a good idea, Nicole. It's probably for the best. Financial organization isn't really your strong suit, is it? It was the perfect setup. She had walked right into it. You're right, it can be so complicated, I said, my voice full of false sincerity. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a single, folded envelope. It was the bill from the collection agency about her defaulted car loan. For example, I found this in the folder. It got mixed in with Grandma's papers. It's addressed to you, but at Grandma's address. I was so worried when I saw it, I thought maybe someone had stolen your identity. I handed the letter to her. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and the color drained from her face. The smug, condescending mask vanished, replaced by a flicker of pure panic. This is junk mail, she stammered, her voice suddenly tight. She crumpled the letter in her fist. They send these things out all the time. It's a scam. A collection agency for a defaulted car loan? I pressed gently, my expression one of innocent concern. That seems pretty specific for a scam. Are you sure everything is okay, Jenna? Because if you're having money troubles, you know you can tell us. There's no shame in it. My offer of help, dripping with the same faux sympathy she had shown me, was like gasoline on a fire. Her panic morphed into defensive fury. How dare you, she hissed, her voice rising. You're bringing this up here, in front of Grandma, you're trying to upset her. I'm not trying to upset anyone, I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. I'm just concerned. You said I was irresponsible, but this letter seems to suggest you're the one in trouble. I just want to understand what's really going on. Grandma Margaret looked back and forth between us, her face a canvas of confusion and dawning suspicion. Jenna, what is this about a car loan? It's nothing, Grandma, Jenna snapped, turning on her with a sharpness that made Margaret flinch. It's a mistake. Nicole is just being malicious. She's jealous because you trust me more than her. The accusation was wild, desperate, and poorly executed. In her haste to defend herself, she had shown a flash of the ugly impatience she usually kept hidden from our grandmother. It was a crucial mistake. The loving, concerned granddaughter had vanished, replaced by a cornered, spitting cat. I am not jealous, Jenna, I said calmly, standing up. I'm worried about our grandmother being lied to. Jenna glared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. She had been so certain of her victory, so sure of her superior ability to manipulate, that she hadn't prepared for a countermove. She had expected tears or anger, not calm, documented facts. She opened her mouth to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. She stuffed the crumpled letter into her pocket and forced a brittle smile. I think you should leave, Nicole, she said, her voice trembling with rage. You've done enough damage for one day. I looked at my grandmother, whose face was now filled with a deep, troubled worry. The first seed of doubt had been planted. Of course, I said softly. I leaned down and kissed Margaret's cheek. I'll call you tomorrow, Grandma. As I walked out of the room, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a grim sense of purpose. This was just the first reveal. Jenna had reacted exactly as I'd hoped, with lies and aggression. She had shown her true colors, and our grandmother had seen it. The foundation of her deception was beginning to crack. Jenna's panic escalated into a full-blown campaign of control. In the days following our confrontation, my calls to Grandma Margaret started going straight to voicemail. When I'd try the house landline, Jenna would answer, her voice clipped and hostile. She's resting, she'd say, or it's not a good time, Nicole. You get her too agitated. She was trying to build a wall around Margaret, to isolate her from me completely so she could repair the damage I had done and reinforce her web of lies. This, however, was another critical error. By blocking my access, she was also blocking my ability to help, which gave Ben the perfect, ethical reason to step in. She's screening my calls, I told him one evening. I can't get through to Grandma at all. Then I have no choice, Ben said, picking up his phone. As her legal counsel, I need to ensure she is not being unduly influenced or isolated, especially now that there's a clear family conflict regarding her estate. I have a professional obligation to speak with my client directly. He scheduled a formal meeting with Margaret at her home for the following week, citing the need to review some details in her trust documents. Jenna couldn't reasonably refuse to let her grandmother's lawyer have a meeting, but I knew it would send her into a spiral. While we waited for the meeting, Ben did some digging on his end. He cross-referenced the checks Margaret had written to Jenna with withdrawals from Margaret's investment accounts. The pattern was alarming. Jenna hadn't just been getting small gifts. She had pressured Margaret into cashing out over $50,000 in stocks over the last 18 months. The withdrawals were always followed by a large check to Jenna. This was no longer just about the will. This was potential financial exploitation. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Ben, using his legal research tools, searched for any public records associated with Jenna's name. He found a recent small claims court filing against her. A young graphic designer had sued Jenna for non-payment for a website she had built for Jenna's brand. The designer's testimony was available online, and it was damning. She described Jenna's endless promises of exposure instead of payment and the string of elaborate excuses for why the money was always coming next week. Jenna wasn't just a manipulator within our family, she had a history of exploiting others. The day of the meeting arrived. Ben went to the house alone first to speak with Margaret privately. I waited in the car down the street, my heart pounding. About 30 minutes later, Ben called me. "Okay," he said, "I've spoken with her. She's heartbroken, but she's listening. She wants you to come in. Jenna is here and she's not happy." I walked up the familiar path to the front door and let myself in. The atmosphere in the sitting room was thick with tension. Margaret was in her armchair, looking pale and distraught. Jenna stood near the fireplace like a sentry, her arms crossed, her face a mask of thunderous fury. Ben stood by the window, a leather portfolio in his hand. "Nicole," Margaret said, her voice trembling, "Ben has been telling me some very upsetting things." "Grandma, he is lying," Jenna burst out. "He's in on it with her. They're trying to turn you against me." Ben held up a hand. "Jen. Everything I am about to present is a documented fact," he said, his voice calm and authoritative. "As your mother's legal counsel, my only concern is her welfare." He then, systematically and dispassionately, laid out the case. He didn't use emotional language, he just presented the evidence. He showed Margaret the bank statements, highlighting the large withdrawals. He showed her the corresponding checks made out to Jenna. He presented the printout of the defaulted car loan and the credit card statements with their astronomical balances. "This is not a picture of a financially responsible person, Margaret," Ben said gently. "This is a picture of someone in severe financial distress who has been turning to you to fund a lifestyle she cannot afford." With each document, Jenna's denials grew weaker and more frantic. "Those were gifts. She wanted to help me. You're twisting everything." The final blow was the court filing from the graphic designer. Ben read a short excerpt from the designer's testimony, describing the exact same patterns of deception and manipulation Jenna had used on our family. Margaret stared at the papers spread on the coffee table, her face ashen. The woman she saw in those documents, a predator, a cheat, was not the granddaughter she thought she knew. The spell was broken. Not with a shout, but with the quiet, irrefutable weight of the truth. Tears streamed down Margaret's face. "You lied to me," she whispered, looking at Jenna. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of profound, soul-crushing realization. "You told me she was the irresponsible one. You lied about everything." Jenna looked from Margaret's heartbroken face to mine, and finally to Ben's impassive one. She had been outmaneuvered at every turn. Stripped of her lies, she had nothing left. She let out a frustrated sob, grabbed her purse, and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The room was silent, save for the sound of our grandmother's quiet weeping. I went to her, kneeling by her chair and taking her hand. The fight was over. Now, the healing had to begin. In the week that followed the disastrous confrontation, an eerie silence fell. Jenna didn't call. She didn't text. It was the calm before a storm, and I knew she wasn't the type to retreat quietly. Her next move, when it came, was breathtaking in its audacity. An email arrived from her, sent not just to me, but to a dozen extended family members, aunts, uncles, cousins. The subject line read, "A family celebration for Grandma Margaret." The email was a masterpiece of spin. Jenna wrote about Grandma's recent health challenges and the importance of surrounding her with love. She was inviting everyone to a special dinner at her apartment the following Saturday to honor our beloved matriarch. She made a point of mentioning how she had taken on the responsibility of managing Margaret's affairs to ease her burden. It was a transparent, desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative, to present herself to the wider family as the devoted, capable caregiver before the truth of her deception could spread. My first instinct was to refuse, to protect Margaret from another one of Jenna's performances. But Ben saw it differently. "No, we have to go," he said, looking up from the email. "This is her endgame. She's trying to create a public record of her new role. She's staging her own coronation, and we're going to attend." He looked at me, a calm, strategic light in his eyes. "This is our chance to end it, publicly and definitively." We spent the next few days preparing. Ben drafted a formal letter on his firm's letterhead detailing the legal ramifications of undue influence and financial exploitation. I spoke at length with Margaret. She was frail and heartbroken, but the revelation of Jenna's betrayal had ignited a spark of her old, formidable strength. She was done being a victim. She agreed to come to the dinner. Saturday evening arrived. We picked up Margaret, who was dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue dress, her expression resolved. Jenna's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from her Instagram feed: minimalist white furniture, strategically placed succulents, and a giant, abstract painting that probably cost more than her rent. The room was filled with relatives, all cooing over how wonderful Jenna was for organizing the event. Jenna greeted us at the door, her smile stretched tight over her panic. She couldn't very well turn away the guest of honor. She led Margaret to a comfortable chair, and for the next hour, she played the perfect hostess, flitting about with trays of appetizers and refilling glasses, all while casting nervous glances in our direction. The climax came after the main course. Jenna tapped her wine glass with a spoon, calling for everyone's attention. "I just want to thank you all for coming," she began, beaming at the assembled family. "It means so much to have you here to celebrate our incredible grand. Ma Margaret, as many of you know, I've recently stepped in to help manage her affairs. It's a big responsibility, but one I am honored to take on, to make sure her legacy is protected and she can live out her years without a single worry." She raised her glass. "To Grandma." As the chorus of "To Grandma" echoed through the room, I saw my opening. I remained seated, a small, calm smile on my face. When the chatter died down, I spoke, my voice clear and carrying easily through the apartment. "That's a beautiful sentiment, Jenna," I said. "I'm sure Grandma Margaret's lawyer will appreciate your diligence and commitment." A confused silence fell over the room. Jenna's smile froze. Her lawyer?" she stammered. "Yes," I said, turning to Ben, who was standing beside my chair. "I don't think everyone here has been properly introduced. Aunts, uncles, cousins, this is my husband, Ben." A ripple of surprise went through the family. We had kept our wedding small, and many hadn't met him yet. I then delivered the final, devastating line. "He's also the managing partner at a law firm. The same firm, as it happens, that has handled Grandma Margaret's estate for the last 8 years. The color drained from Jenna's face. The full implication of my words hit her like a physical blow. The room was utterly silent as every eye swiveled from Ben to me and finally to a horrified Jenna. Ben stepped forward, his demeanor entirely professional. "Given that my wife has been formally disinherited under what I have determined to be clear circumstances of undue influence," he stated calmly, "I have advised my client, Margaret, that the recent codicil to her will is legally invalid. Furthermore, we have uncovered a series of financial transactions amounting to significant elder financial exploitation. We will be taking formal steps to see that those funds are returned to Margaret's estate." He placed the letter he had drafted on the dining table. "This document outlines the legal situation. I trust you'll all want to be aware of the facts." Jenna stared at him, then at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The public coronation she had so carefully staged had just become her public execution. Her carefully constructed image of the responsible daughter had been shattered in front of the entire family. She let out a small, strangled gasp, turned, and fled into her bedroom, slamming the door. The dinner party was over. In the stunned silence, my grandmother Margaret, looking stronger than she had in months, spoke up, her voice clear and firm. "Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Nicole." The matriarch was back in charge. The aftermath of Jenna's disastrous dinner party was swift and decisive. The family, armed with the undeniable truth, rallied around Margaret. The whispers of sympathy for Jenna evaporated, replaced by shock and anger at the depth of her deception. She had not only tried to steal an inheritance, she had tried to poison the family against me and had preyed upon its most vulnerable member. Overnight, she became a pariah. In the following weeks, Ben, acting with Margaret's full and enthusiastic consent, executed the plan we had laid out. He formally nullified the codicil to the will, restoring the original document that named my sister and me as equal heirs. But he didn't stop there. He compiled the evidence of the $50,000 in gifts and sent Jenna a formal legal demand for the full amount to be repaid to Margaret's estate, stating that if she refused, they would pursue a civil lawsuit for financial exploitation. He also included a clause stipulating that any unpaid portion of this debt would be deducted from her share of the future inheritance. Faced with legal ruin and total family ostracization, Jenna crumbled. She had no resources to fight back, no allies left to manipulate. She sold her car, gave up her trendy apartment, and moved into a small, rented room across town. The lifestyle influencer persona vanished from the internet. Her accounts went dark. The last I heard, she was working a low-wage retail job, the harsh reality of her financial situation having finally caught up with her. She was forced to agree to a payment plan, sending a small check to my grandmother's trust account every month, a constant, humbling reminder of her failed scheme. With the crisis over, the most important work could begin: healing. I spent nearly every afternoon with my grandmother. We didn't talk much about Jenna at first. Instead, we fell back into our old, comfortable routines. We'd watch old movies, I'd read to her from the newspaper, and she would tell me stories about her childhood. The trust between us, so badly damaged by Jenna's lies, began to knit itself back together. One sunny afternoon, as we sat on her porch, she turned to me, her eyes clear and full of a familiar, deep affection. "I am so sorry, Nicole," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I am so ashamed that I ever doubted you." She twisted my love for both of you into a weapon, and she aimed it right at you. "I know, Grandma," I said, taking her hand. "She fooled you because you have a good heart. You couldn't imagine someone you love being capable of that kind of cruelty." "You have a good heart, too," she replied, squeezing my hand. "You forgave me when I didn't deserve it." "There was never anything to forgive," I assured her. In that quiet moment, all the pain of the last few months washed away, replaced by a profound sense of peace. Justice had been served, not through vengeance, but through the calm, unyielding application of the truth. My relationship with my grandmother was restored, stronger and more honest than before. My husband's integrity and my own had been affirmed. A few months later, Margaret called me with a final piece of news. She had met with Ben and made one last, simple change to her will. She had added a clause, donating a significant portion of what would have been Jenna's share to the legal aid society that had helped the young graphic designer sue my sister. It was a perfect, elegant act of justice, ensuring that Jenna's greed would, in the end, help protect other vulnerable people from predators just like her. Sitting in my own peaceful home that evening, watching Ben cook dinner, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I hadn't sought this fight, but by facing it with strategy and integrity, we had protected the person we loved and restored order to our family. The foundation was sound once more.